the United States is more or less self-sufficient in energy. What it can do then is tell Venezuela, you're not selling this stuff to Cuba anymore, and therefore hugely undermines one of America's rivals. Well, not rival, but someone that's in their sights, Cuba. Secondly, they can say to Russia's customers, you know what? This oil is very similar to Russian oil. It's deep sludgy, actually. It's not particularly good quality. But therefore, you can offer it to Russia's customers and undermine Russia.
The fate of the United Kingdom is closely tied to that of the United States. This is true culturally. It's true politically, increasingly so in the age of social media. It's true economically, and it is true overwhelmingly so in terms of our security arrangements. So this week has not just been a huge one in America, it is huge in its impact on this country too. Since the Second World War, we have rested our foreign security policy on our alliance with the US. Together, we had a conception of the free world and broad agreement on how to promote it. Now, agreement on this basic idea seems to have collapsed, leaving the physical and financial infrastructure of the coalition in place. Britain therefore finds itself deeply conflicted. Take Venezuela. Maduro was a rogue dictator, and a rules-based liberal order is very much better off without him. His rule was against every idea that the US and the UK together have in mind, and Trump has now removed him. But a policy of running Venezuela in order to appropriate that country's natural resources is not the same thing at all, and Britain will find Trump's policy increasingly challenging. That's even before the bizarre approach to Greenland of the Trump administration. So I make no apologies that so much of today's show will again concentrate on the United States. This is very much a domestic as well as a foreign story, and it's reshaping the world we live in. This is The Times at One with me, Daniel Finkelstein. Following the US's capturing of an oil tanker with links to Russia and Venezuela, Donald Trump has said he will personally control the proceeds of up to 50 million barrels of oil from Venezuela. Speaking to the New York Times, Trump warned that Venezuela could be under American control for years to come. And of course, during all that time, its oil reserves would be under American control too. The South American country has the largest oil reserves in the world. So for all that Trump has talked about drugs and narco-terrorism and rested his capture of Maduro on a domestic arrest warrant, how much of this story is all about that three-letter word, oil? Tim Marshall's a journalist, author and broadcaster specialising in foreign affairs and the author of a number of very well-received books on international diplomacy and geography, and he joins me now. Tim, thank you very much indeed for doing so. So that analysis that this ultimately boils down to oil, is that your analysis too?
Partially. I think it's too narrow a window in which to view it, though. Let me deal with oil, but then move on to why I think it's about something wider. You're right about oil, largest reserves, and American companies were kicked out, and now, well, I think his policy is somewhat, the details of it are somewhat incoherent, but the strategy is not. If Chevron, etc., goes back in and revitalizes the largest reserves in the world, that is good for the United States energy. But it also, because the United States is more or less self-sufficient in energy, what it can do then is tell Venezuela, you're not selling this stuff to Cuba anymore, and therefore hugely undermines one of America's rivals. Well, not rival, but someone that's in their sights, Cuba. Secondly, they can say to Russia's customers, you know what? This oil is very similar to Russian oil. It's deep sludgy, actually. It's not particularly good quality. But therefore, you can offer it to Russia's customers and undermine Russia. So in this sense, Daniel, yes, it's about oil. But it's about something else as well. It's about the Monroe Doctrine, and it's about precious metals. So 60% of the world's lithium is in Latin America. 40% of the world's copper is in Latin America. Venezuela itself has various things such as uranium, nickel, bauxite, which the Americans would absolutely love to control because China controls most of it. So you put the whole thing together, their energy, their metals, and the fact that China is all over Latin America. What has this done? This has sent a message to the outside powers. We're back to the Monroe Doctrine. Outside powers are not welcome. We're going to push you out. And I'll try and be brief. If you look at the National Security Strategy document, 33 pages of it came out in December. Page 5, and I'm quoting here. We want a hemisphere free of hostile foreign incursion or ownership of key assets. In other words, we will assert and enforce a Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. And that's why I think looking at oil is too narrow a window.
Oh, thank you very much. So for that very detailed explanation. One of the things that I'm struggling with is understanding how this all works. It doesn't seem as though the United States is proposing to put large numbers of troops into Venezuela. How will it control the oil? Will it, I suppose, just put enough troops in to control the oil fields, or do you see the policy working in some sort of different way?
I can't see troops on the ground in Venezuela. Putting Delta Force in what will be a fantastic movie in 2 or 3 years' time, I don't think really plays that badly, certainly amongst MAGA voters in the United States. Putting tens of thousands of troops into harm's way, and that's quite possibly, well, almost certainly is what would happen if they occupied it in that manner. So this is what I meant at the beginning about how sort of, I think, incoherent the detail is. We're getting absolutely nothing about who is talking to who, what sort of committees are being set up, which companies are talking to the administration in Caracas, etc. We're getting none of that. So I go back to the fact that I think I understand the strategy, whether you agree with it or not, I agree with it or not is irrelevant. I understand their strategy, but as for the detail, how the hell do you do it without putting in tens of thousands unless the regime is going to play ball? And
exactly, and it's very
still out.
It's deeply entwined with Venezuelan domestic politics. After all, the reason why the oil fields are in the trouble that they are is because Chavez capped everyone's wages, and he also capped the price of oil, and that meant that all they could do was stop investing in the maintenance of the oil fields, and that's why we're in a position that we are today. So it's very difficult to see how you run the oil fields without running the government, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely, which again is why, until we get some detail on what a coherent strategy is for the cooperation that is supposed to be going on between Caracas and Washington, then it's all a bit of a nonsense. I would add, Danny, in fairness, I agree with your prognosis of why the country's oil industry is in such a terrible state. I mean, this has gone from being Latin America's richest country in the 70s to a basket case. Sanctions haven't helped either, but it is essentially the Chavista doctrine which has run the country just into the ground and brutalized millions of its citizens in so doing. And so if the American companies are going to go in and reconstitute it, hoping to make profits and in oil sales, etc., it's going to have to take cooperation, and without it, it's just a non-starter.
So that's what I mean. It's entwined.
Sorry, Daniel.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. It's entwined with the overall economic policy of the government. It's hard to see a Chavista general policy which then allows a free market in oil.
Hence these threats. We're not afraid to go back in with boots on the ground. I don't buy it. Same as I don't buy that America's about to invade Greenland. But those are the threats. If they did go in, it's not that the Venezuelan army could in any way, in a conventional war, take on the Americans. Absolutely, they would lose in short order. But then you would see something like Iraq, where there are the militias, there's the collectivos, there's the original army. And I think that's why they're not doing it. They saw what happened in Iraq when they dismantled the regime and sent 300,000 men in the army home with all their guns, and saw what happened. So they're doing it with Delta Force and, well, gangster-like threats. But we have yet to see anything concrete that's going to come out of that. And you're right, the ideology of these Chavistas, I mean, they've all been creaming off the top and they're all extremely rich. They've been robbing the country blind. But they have a Chavista hard socialism ideology, which does not fit with allowing in the Yankees to run the place.
Well, we're going to see what happens. That was Tim Marshall, journalist, author, broadcaster, specialising in foreign affairs and international diplomacy, as everyone who listened will be able to tell.